Is going on, everybody? What's going on, everyone? It is episode 55 of the Sports On broadcast. The Philadelphia Eagles are 3-1, and we have a lot to get to this week. But first, let's get to the man known as Joe Fabiani. Joe, what's going on this week?
What's going on, man? Another week, another win.
Oh, I am excited. The Sixers are playing preseason. The building looks 75% full. We got the Flyers in action tonight. And it's just a great time. We got the MLB playoffs, and of course, the Eagles are atop the NFC at 3-1 after a win that I don't think we expected. So this episode, we're going to look at the Eagles moving atop the NFC East, improving to 3-1. We're going to recap Week 4 in the NFL, go around the league for Week 5, and of course break down the upcoming game against the Cardinals. We hope you will join by commenting on our Facebook Live feed, Periscope, and by tweeting us or simply sending a text to the SE Radio hotline at 267-404-MYSE. Let's jump right into it, Joe. The Eagles go on the road, have a home game on the road in LA against the Chargers. It was a game that you and I were kind of down on. We thought it would be a trap game. Let's get your general thoughts on the game in general.
Yeah, no, we both thought it was going to be a bit of a letdown, for sure. But we were surprised at the game plan. For the second week in a row, it looks like the Eagles are starting to commit to the run, which is something we didn't expect. But that's something refreshing to see, obviously. But yeah, I mean, it's just amazing considering how exposed I think you could say some of the secondary guys were, and the Eagles are still able to pull it out in the end.
Yeah, I agree. We were texting back and forth kind of before the game and saying, I don't know, it was kind of a trap game for us. We thought that possibly the running game wouldn't stick to the running game, but that's exactly what they did. Again, for the second game in a row, I don't know. I look at this game and just think good teams beat bad teams and good teams win close games. And that's exactly what the Eagles did in the last two games. And they did it via the run. Carson Wentz wasn't dropping back 40 times again. They stuck to the run. It was an unbalanced offense, but in the running favor.
Right.
So it was just really surprising to see Doug Peterson kind of have what I call a clean game. There wasn't any bad challenges. Um, I guess you could question, but you can always kind of question one or two plays in the game. But really, I thought he called a pretty good game and had a solid offensive game plan going into the matchup.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that they saw where they could expose the Chargers, and that was the run up the middle. They weren't really running at their explosive defensive ends all that often. And you saw that obviously in the Garrett Blunt's huge game. And even I was just blown away when you look at it at halftime. I remember looking. I think there was maybe like 3 minutes left in the half, and I was looking at the breakdowns, how many dropbacks and how many runs, and it was I believe it was 20-20 with a few minutes left to go before
Right.
halftime. I was just floored, honestly.
I thought they did a very good job as well of, the Chargers did have some nice passing plays that went for big chunks, but they really bottled up Melvin Gordon, and they couldn't use play action off that. I was really surprised that the defensive front seven kind of stood tall. Luckily, we got Rodney McLeod and Jordan Hicks back, but I mean, even, you take out Fletcher Cox of that lineup, and I was really surprised how well Bo Allen, Timmy Jernigan, and the rest of the front seven kind of played against Philip Rivers and the rest of the running game.
Right. I think that Bo Allen's first official sack, I believe, of his career.
I'm not sure about that, but I wouldn't be surprised if it was.
Yeah. But no, definitely a big game for him. A couple guys. I mean, you know what? The defensive line looked good. I mean, Chris Long played well. It was nice to see Derek Barnett scoop up that fumble recovery that Long forced early in the game too. So it's nice to see him getting involved.
Yep.
Uh, but for me, there's a few guys that I'm kind of worried about, but we'll get into that a bit later. But yeah, no, they definitely had some big chunk plays. Which kind of tends to happen. I feel like the last two games, the Eagles, they've been in the lead in the fourth quarter, so they have to kind of, put their backs to the end zone and kind of just defend and kind of get time taken off the clock and kind of just, basically come after what they're giving them. And when you really look at it, the last, I would say, with like maybe 10 minutes left in the fourth quarter, they're really letting their guys, they're playing off so that they were giving all the underneath stuff to the guys to go out there and catch, and they're going to make the tackle. They're going to give them 5 yards all day long. But they were able to expose them a little bit in the secondary.
Right. One thing I really liked about the game is I'm looking at the stats right here, and time of possession was 40-20. The Eagles are doing really well, in a lot of statistical categories that I think not many people would look at. I think John Clark let me pull it up here. He had a tweet earlier in the week that said the Eagles' offense in the NFL is first in 35 minutes time of possession. They're second in 96 first downs, second in 50.8 percentage on third downs. They're third in 392.5 yards per game, and they're third in the league in 143 rush yards per game. Those are pretty telling stats.
Right.
Really surprised. Now, they did go against the 28th ranked and the 30th ranked running defense these last 2 weeks, but still, I mean, the game plan has changed. And the other thing I really liked, other than, of course, Jake Elliott, he's been a big surprise for the Eagles, but Carson Wentz pre-snap reads and the way he's audibling to quick slants to Alshon Jeffrey for a touchdown, or audibling the run to the opposite side that it's supposed to go. I just think he's really stepped up in that, and it's kind of benefited the Eagles offense. As stagnant as they've been in the last two second halves of the last 2 weeks, it's because they're chewing up clock. And that's exactly, I mean, if you look at the 13-3 Cowboys last year, it was don't let the defense on the field too long and control the clock. And that's exactly what the Eagles are doing thus far through a quarter of the season.
Yeah, and it's a nice change of pace for Eagles fans when we're used to Chip Kelly just kind of going with it, 3 and outs, here we go. Not really paying too much attention to time of possession, but it's refreshing. And we talked a lot about this last season, how the running game is going to help a young quarterback, and you kind of have to look to that, especially with a team that could be exposed in the secondary to control the clock. And that's what the Eagles were able to do the last 2 weeks.
And even to your point, I mean, Chip Kelly, on time of possession, but even think back to Andy Reid. He would go against a team that wasn't very good against the rush, and yet he would still pass a lot. We don't want to give Doug Peterson, he has had his mishaps, but it seems like he is progressing every week, has a good game plan going in, along with Frank Reich, and even Carson Wentz, I'm sure, is weighing in on what they want to do through film study. But, this team, I feel like I don't know, I just came out of this game thinking this team can contend for a division and possibly win a game in the playoffs, and that's big for the Eagles, who haven't won a playoff game since, 2008? It's been a decade. I mean, it's time.
Yeah, it's certainly been a while. But yeah, no, it is refreshing, and I think we can say that this year's 3-1 feels a lot better than last year's 3-1. And realistically, going forward, I mean, the Eagles are only going to be able to add guys to that defense. Going into mid-October, early November, you're going to have guys that are going to start falling off. But I mean, the Eagles are going to get Darby back.
Yep.
They're gonna add Jalen Watkins back. Fletcher Cox is going to get healthy. Potentially even adding Sidney Jones to the secondary as well. So they have a lot of guys coming back. So it's going to be refreshing. I think that the defense, I know, like I said, they gave up big chunks at the end of the game, but I think as the season goes on, they're actually going to get better with getting all those guys back into the lineup.
And we've praised the offense for the last 2 weeks and kind of the game plan, but even think about, and it is kind of the negative for me this week, it's Torrey Smith with the drops. But if he catches one of those 3 drops he has, the stats look better. He'll have more confidence. And even, Alshon Jeffrey, I think, kind of to your point, and I reflected back on this because I was a little down after the game, or even the last 2 weeks. I mean, last week, I think going into the fourth quarter, the wide receivers had 7 receptions and 67 yards. And then, last week they have, 4 combined between Alshon Jeffrey and Torrey Smith. And I voiced that frustration to you, and credit to you. You said it's going to take some time for them to get used to Carson Wentz throwing to him, and I'm really excited for that progression to happen over the next 12 games.
Yeah, that was something we touched on about 3 weeks ago. But when you really look at it, they're kind of on schedule, you could say. I said they weren't really going to hit their stride until about week 5, week 6, and I feel like we're going to see that. Actually, I like Torrey Smith a lot in this upcoming game. Obviously going against Patrick Peterson, who I believe is going to shadow Alshon. The majority of the game, it's going to give Torrey Smith and Nelson Aguilar a lot of opportunities to do something. I think that if you go back, I don't know if you saw it, Torrey Smith tweeted out after the win, great team win. I'm going through one of the worst stretches of my career right now, but great team win. So he knows he's struggling. And, I think going home after a big road win, which is always huge in the NFL, I think he's really going to bring it this week and get out there and make a big play.
Absolutely, and being home, I'm sure, will help that as well. So hopefully he breaks out, and we'll get into the matchup a little bit, but to your point, you have Torrey Smith kind of breaking out this game along with Nelson Aguilar. Even Zach Ertz against an old defense has been very consistent through the first 4 weeks, which is very big because he's been one of those late bloomers kind of every season. So he's been a bright spot as well.
Yeah, right now Zach Ertz is on pace for 84 catches and 1,300 yards. So he's having a hell of a start to the year.
Wow, that's very good, and he's like top 5 in receiving yards as well. With wide receivers included. So we'll see where that goes. Let's jump to one of our segments called What's the Call?
West right slot, 2 jet, all go on 101. Right. Set. Green 80. Green set.
All right, guys, you know what this is. It's our favorite play of the week. Joe, I'm going to throw it to you and see what your favorite play was.
My favorite play comes back late in the first quarter. It was a fake end-around screen to Wendell Smallwood that ultimately set up a Jake Elliott field goal to make the score 10-0. But just the play design, playing off the run, I think that you're kind of seeing that development in the offense, in the past 2 weeks, that they want to establish the run and go to the play action. And obviously in that situation it worked. And that they've won – obviously, they struggled in the first 2 games with their screen game, but the last week, to have that big screen play break off like that, with Wendell Smallwood, stepping up for Darren Sproles is huge. And, ultimately, it only set up a field goal, but it was still points on the board in a tough road game. Well, I guess you could say realistically it turned into a home game, but you would take those points on the road any day of the week.
I saw something from the San Diego Tribune. They did like a highlight thing on Twitter, and they were asking LA Chargers fans, like, what's going on during the game, and a lot of them were walking the concourse because it was so green in the stands that they didn't want to be kind of associated with the Eagles fans. And I get that. It's not fun if it's supposed to be a home game. If it's not fun to sit down by the field. One guy was complaining. He's like, yeah, I paid for these tickets, and all the Chargers fans are up here watching it on a TV. So that's where I'm at, because if they score a touchdown, I'm not going to celebrate in front of, with the Eagles fans and slap high fives and everything. I'm going to go where the Chargers fans were. So that was definitely interesting, along with, the fact that when Carson Wentz comes out the tunnel, there's a ton of cheers, and Phillip Rivers comes out the tunnel and there's a ton of boos. It was a very strange dynamic, but what you said about Smallwood was actually right on cue, because Sean on Facebook says, any thoughts on Smallwood? And I think we kind of glanced over that as we were talking about the running game, and that is huge. I mean, he has stepped up, at least for 1 week, where Darren Sproles, I kind of said, was probably the best fit for the offense, but Smallwood is kind of putting his head down, and even Corey Clement, he's running hard. He picked up some 3rd and 1s. So this running back by committee to this point has actually worked out pretty well for the Eagles, and Deuce Staley rotating them in, other than a couple times where he didn't include LeGarrette Blount in the second half. But as far as my favorite play, just kind of getting back to that, again, it's another run from the running back, and it's got to be the LeGarrette Blount beast mode 68-yard scamper that he had. I feel like it's been a while since the Eagles have gotten a 20-plus yard rushing play, other than, a screen pass to Darren Sproles or something like that. It's pretty cool to see the offensive line going forward and attacking instead of backing up and blocking for Carson Wentz. I just feel like they kind of imposed their will on the defensive line that we talked about a lot last week, Alex and I, how they have, Joey Bosa, they have Melvin Ingram, they have some good defensive line personnel, and yet the Eagles went in there and ran the ball all over the place.
Yeah, going into last week's game, Melvin Ingram was tied for the league in sacks at 5.5. So yeah, I was definitely worried about him. I wrote that in my preview article, but yeah, I mean it was great to see Lane Johnson coming along, and Jason Peters put in a nice showing as well. And actually, this morning I saw on Pro Football Focus that Lane Johnson and Jason Peters were the two highest graded tackles in the entire league last week.
Wow.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right, so as we kind of transition, I just have one question for you and the guys, everyone watching. And the question would be where the Eagles are right now in your mind. And I know it's early, it's only a quarter through the season, but they have looked pretty good. There's been some up and downs that we've talked about a lot on these shows, through the first 4 weeks. So the options I have for you are the Eagles a division leader, a playoff contender, or a fraud? And I want to get your thoughts on that kind of quickly as people weigh in on Facebook and Periscope and everything like that.
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely say that, they're in the running for the division. I said in the beginning of the year, I think it was going to come down to two teams, and the Cowboys and the Eagles, and I think it's shaping out to be that way early on. So I definitely think that they're going to be in the playoff contention for sure. When it comes to the division, I just think it's a two-team race with the Eagles and Dallas.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I think they're definitely there as a division leader. It is shaping up exactly how you predicted. The Giants have fallen off, and even the Redskins, they have looked good. They just haven't pulled out I mean, they didn't look good against the Eagles per se, but, Monday Night Football, they took Kansas City to the wire. So, I don't know. I just feel like they're not real. They always fall off kind of at the end of the season or midway through the season.
Well, and they're also getting bit by the injury bug. Josh Norman's now out.
Yeah.
They were already missing their middle linebacker, and I believe they had another number of injuries to the linebacking core last week. So yeah, I mean, I don't really expect to see too much, and then obviously we saw a little bit of how their young receivers are going to struggle in Josh Doctson dropping that touchdown late in that game.
I think if all goes well for the Eagles, they could be a playoff contender, as in, not a Super Bowl contender, but a playoff contender where they could get a home game, they could win a round or two and advance if all goes well. I think right now they're kind of a division contender. So that kind of wraps up week 4 for us and the Eagles, but let's move into week 4 surprise and disappointing moments and then jump into our week 5 predictions. So let's start off with your biggest surprise and or disappointment from week 4 in the NFL, Joe.
My biggest surprise would just, I feel like I talk about the Patriots every week, but just looking at how poor the Patriots defense has been over the the openings of the season, it's just baffling. They have absolutely no pass rush. That was a team going into the season that people were talking about possibly going undefeated and going back to the Super Bowl. Right now they're looking like they're well, actually, realistically, they're chasing the Bills, which is crazy to say. They're missing their middle linebacker, Dante Hightower. A big playmaker for them, but they have no pass rush, and Stephon Gilmore has not lived up to his contract so far, and it's just crazy to see that Brady is going to have to basically put this team on his back and win all these games this season because they really have no threat on defense.
Yeah, that's exactly what I had for my surprise as well. There's been games before where you think the Patriots, one that comes to mind is the we're on to Cincinnati game where they gave up, 52 points or 47 points, something like that to Kansas City. They come back and shut down Cincinnati at home. But I don't know, it's just a different animal this year. They've lost some key pieces. And you're right. I mean, Tom Brady is going to have to go out and win games at, how old is he? 40, 41 now? Because he doesn't have a defense, in my opinion, that is capable of bouncing back. I just think they are what they are in some aspects. So that's been my surprise. Let's move on to disappointments. My biggest disappointment, and it doesn't really have to do anything with the team per se, but two of the budding stars in the NFL have been Derek Carr and Marcus Mariota. They both suffered leg injuries last season, and now they're out again to start. Well, not to start, but early in the season, Derek Carr goes down with back spasms. They're calling it. And Marcus Mariota, I guess he had a concussion or something was going on, pulled a hamstring. I didn't really catch what the injury is, but it's just a shame. They're kind of Derek Carr and Marcus Mariota are two of the names that you think of when you think of younger quarterbacks kind of taking over for the Peyton Mannings, the Tom Brady's, the Drew Breeses. You know what I mean? And it's just sad to see them go down once again.
Yeah, it's actually wow. We're on the same page again. It's pretty funny. I was gonna bring up the injury bug as well.
Well, hopefully we're not for predictions, but go ahead.
Yeah, it's it's really frustrating to see because I feel like the league as a whole has lacked an overall excitement so far early on in the season. And now you have Julio Jones getting banged up. You had Derek Carr, you had Mariota. The Seahawks lost Chris Carson to a broken leg. It's crazy to me that all these injuries just piling up, especially on these big name guys and guys that you're really excited to watch every Sunday, and you want to see really help the league right now because obviously they're struggling with all the protests and stuff going on, and now I saw earlier in the week that owners were fearing for sponsorship dropping out too. So I mean it's kind of you're in the point where they need these guys that you really want to tune into and watch and see, and they're losing these guys.
Yeah, absolutely. This isn't on the sheet, and we didn't talk about it, but what are your thoughts on Deshaun Watson? Is he real or fake? I mean, he's one of those guys that, a lot of success at Clemson, caps it off with the national title, and then moves on to Houston. Wasn't the first quarterback overall in the draft, which I was kind of surprised, but I mean...
Which was a huge mistake.
Yeah, and I really, he took over last week, and I just want to get kind of your general thoughts on, like, real or fake, will he keep it up, all that kind of stuff.
Well, I mean, if you remember when we were talking about the draft process, I talked about Deshaun Watson as being my number one quarterback in the draft, and obviously he's showing that. I know Mitchell Trubisky's going to play Monday night, but I don't like him against that Minnesota defense, so he's going to have a hell of a time. But no, I do think Deshaun Watson is legit. I said that going back to all of our draft discussions. You guys can go check out those old videos. But yeah, no, he's legit. I mean, he's shown it. He did it in Foxborough. And again, last week, helping them put up 57 points. I think he brings a different dynamic to that offense, and it's really going to open things up and really, get Hopkins involved. He's looked good the last few weeks, and I really think he's here to stay.
Even 3 weeks ago against Cincinnati on Thursday night, it's very rare that the away team wins on Thursday night. Of course, that really hasn't been the case this year, but I mean, you look at that 50-yard scamper that he had. He just makes plays consistently, and he can do it with his legs too, which is kind of the new age quarterback in the NFL. So yeah, I agree. I don't think he's going to put up 57 points every week. He's not going to put up 40 fantasy points every week, but
I'm sure fantasy owners would love that.
Well, he's a smart quarterback as well. He doesn't really turn the ball over, and he can fit it into windows too with his arm. So I think he will have some success. But that was a slip up. But yeah, no, I think he'll have some success, and I think he has kind of a pretty good team, to be honest, in Houston.
Oh yeah.
If they put up 24 points a week, they're going to come out with a win because of that defense. But I mean, even having Lamar Miller and DeAndre Hopkins to go to is huge for him in his progression through week one. All right, guys, let's move into my favorite part of the show, and that would be our picks and our predictions for week 5 in the NFL. Let's start with the Carolina Panthers at Detroit. They're both 3-1 now? And
yeah, leading their divisions.
Yep, absolutely. So let's throw it to you, Joe. I'll get some music going and we can make some predictions. All right, like I said, we have Carolina and Detroit on tap first. Who are you going with?
I like Detroit in this game. I think Carolina's going to be riding high off of a huge win in Foxborough up against the Patriots. But I feel like Detroit's not really getting the respect they deserve. They played tough. They realistically they could be 4-0 right now if it wasn't for that call against Golden Tate against the Falcons. So people aren't really talking about that. But their defense has been great. They've been forcing turnovers every game. Stafford's been great. There's games where he can take over and throw for 300 plus, and there's games where he could be the game manager. And they've gotten solid production out of Amir Abdullah. I just really like this Detroit front against the Carolina Panthers.
This isn't good when we are both on the same page to start predictions and surprise and disappointment on the week. But yeah, I tend to agree with you. Detroit Lions defense has been a lot better. They're better on the back end so they can guard. And Matt Stafford, really since Megatron left, has been spreading the ball around. And that's kind of huge. I mean, their run game is a lot better, especially from last year. But I think Matthew Stafford's kind of progression in the fact that, he doesn't, when the play breaks down, he's not looking directly for Megatron. He's spreading the ball around. Marvin Jones is getting involved. Of course, Golden Tate, and even the rookie Kenny Golladay has kind of pitched in for some big games. And they could be 3-1. When I look at the Panthers on the other side, I don't know. Christian McCaffrey hasn't really lived up to what we thought he would be in his rookie season. Of course, it's early, but I mean, I don't know. I just thought he would kind of hit the ground running, and he really hasn't. And then, yeah, Cam got it going last week, but it's against the worst defense in the NFL right now. Devin Funchess, another guy, kind of a no-name that had 2 touchdowns for him last week. So I like the way that the Panthers have kind of come out. It looks like Cam is, recovered from his shoulder surgery. But I don't know. I just really like Detroit at home, especially because their defense can get after a quarterback. They'll have to keep Cam Newton as a passing quarterback this week to do that, though. Let's move into our second game. We have the Seattle Seahawks going on the road. They've struggled a little bit. They're going against the NFL's top offense in the LA Rams. That's right, the LA Rams. They're averaging 35 points a game. Now, remember, they have played Cowboys defense very young. They played San Francisco and Indy, so that's why their points per game are kind of inflated. But who do you like in this game?
I'm all over the Rams in this game. Seattle's been frustrating, especially for fantasy owners. Yep, Doug Baldwin, you're killing me. But no, realistically, they're struggling. They just lost their starting running back in Chris Carson. I know they have a good number of backs to fill in there, but their offensive line has struggled. Realistically, I feel like they're missing Curse on the other side too. The other side of Baldwin. Their defense is what it is. They're going to keep them in the game. But, the offensive side of the ball is struggling mightily, and Todd Gurley's really coming on. Jared Goff is showing you why he was the number 1 pick last year. He's really progressed. They have dynamic weapons on the outside in Sammy Watkins, and they have their young tight end coming along too. And, they have a good defense. They have a good secondary with Tremaine Johnson leading the way. I love everything the Rams are doing right now.
Aaron Donald is back as well. That's been huge for the Rams. Todd Gurley, best running back in the league right now. And I really like what Sean McVay has kind of done, motivating these younger players, grab somebody like Sammy Watkins to help out Jared Goff. And I like that a lot. But for some reason, I don't know, the Seattle defense just, I feel like they can shut down the Rams one more time. And yeah, the Seattle can't run the ball, but they did find a rookie in McKissick, and he's running hard. Eddie Lacy doesn't give you much, but I feel like if the Seattle Seahawks are able to use Jimmy Graham over the middle, which hasn't happened so far this season, but if they're able to do that and get enough of the X plays, that's 20 yards or more, I don't know. I just have a funny feeling, and I don't know why, but I think Seattle will kind of shut down that offense and show that a legitimate defense can peel back that 35 points per game by the Rams and hold them to 20. And I think Seattle can put up more than 20 points. So I'm going to ride with Seattle this week. You got the Rams. Let's move into our third prediction before we get to the Eagles' upcoming matchup against the Cardinals, and that would be the old Green Bay Packers and Aaron Rodgers going against the Cowboys in a rematch from the playoffs last season.
I love Green Bay in this game. I know that Dallas has played well, but they've had their fair share of problems, and to me, it might just be me, but Dez Bryant looks a step slower to me this season. I don't know if any of our viewers or even you have picked that up, but he doesn't look as explosive to me. Obviously he has the range and he's very strong, so he can go up and get the ball, but he's not as explosive as he was to me. So I feel like that's kind of where they're lacking in the passing game. Dak Prescott's done a lot to really try to take over games and really show what he's about. And, Dak's played very well. But, after last week and just watching Rodgers the week before, really coming back against Cincinnati at home and just tearing them apart and then basically laughing the Bears off the field last week. I love Aaron Rodgers when his confidence is an all-time high, and I think they're rolling in there with his head held high, and I like what the Packers are going to bring in this game.
Yeah, I really think Ty Montgomery hurts the Packers, but I still like the Packers in this game, especially because of how young the secondary is for the Cowboys.
Right.
They have Jordy Nelson. Devontae Adams may or may not play. I know he's got a severe concussion because of the Danny Trevathan hit. But even someone like Randall Cobb or I don't
Or
know.
Geronimo Allison.
Yeah. Or even Martellus Bennett.
Exploding.
Even
Yeah.
Martellus Bennett, I think he gets involved early. I don't know, just Cowboys, something about them, like they can't stop an offense. And then you saw it last week against the Rams, but now you have the Packers and Aaron Rodgers. I just feel like they're going to pick them apart. And I mean, we are a little biased because we are Eagles fans. I have an Eagles symbol right there, but I mean, I don't know. I just feel like the Cowboys haven't clicked quite yet. And to get back to your point on Dez Bryant, I feel like once he was paid, he just didn't start trying as hard. Or to be honest, to bring it back home here, we haven't seen the same explosiveness out of Alshon Jeffrey either. Some of these bigger wide receivers, Demaryius Thomas is another one that kind of comes to mind. They're not able to get down the field as quickly as I thought they would. So some of these bigger wide receivers kind of fallen off. Brandon Marshall's another one, although he is older. And now that I've gone completely off the rails, let's get back to the game. And I'm going to say that the Green Bay Packers will be winners. So we'll see. We disagreed on one game, which is usually not very good because we're agreeing a whole lot. Let's move on to the Eagles and the Cardinals and talk about the injuries first. The one that I missed that we have on the sheet, I saw Timmy Jernigan did not practice today because of a heel, and that's kind of interesting. I didn't really know anything about that. Fletcher Cox up the middle as well did not participate. He's got that calf injury, and he's uncertain for Sunday. If I had to take a guess, I would say he's probably not going to play. Wendell Smallwood also did not practice today. He's got a knee injury. Not much word on that. I'm assuming it's just kind of a bruise or something. Not too serious. And then, of course, Corey Graham and Jalen Watkins are still day-to-day with hamstring injuries. When we get to Arizona, they, of course, lost David Johnson with wrist surgery. And that's huge, I think, going into this game. But also, I took a peek at the injury list from last week, and I found that Robert Nkemdiche, he's their defensive tackle that they drafted. He's a rookie, and although he has not really surprised or stood out, he was out last week, and both their guards on the offensive line, Alex Boone and Mike Iupati, missed last week. So I think that's really big, especially kind of getting into the X factors of the game. The Eagles' defensive line has been the strong point of the defense, and when you look at an immobile quarterback like Carson Palmer and then a banged-up offensive line for the Cardinals, I don't think it bodes well for them.
Yeah, Carson Palmer's a statue back there. He can't move in the pocket whatsoever. I love Brandon Graham in this game. I'm not concerned if Fletcher Cox doesn't play, to be honest with you. I like the depth that they have. And even last week, they did have a few plays where they did swing Brandon Graham inside and Vinny Curry. And they're able to create pressure with their front four. It doesn't matter really who's out there. They have a great rotation. So, if this was a bigger, meaningful game, I'd be concerned if Fletcher Cox isn't out there. But, I think after watching last week and the push that you saw from guys that aren't named Fletcher Cox, it's enough to show you that, this line can get it done, even if Fletcher Cox is sidelined for a week or two more.
Yeah, I agree as well. And I guess the one thing that does worry me about this matchup, now, to be honest, I think this game is going to be a lock for the Eagles. I think you're going to be able to put your feet up by the fourth quarter. They'll be up double digits. But the one thing that does concern me is the speed that Arizona has. If they go kind of to the Eli Manning school of things and get the ball out quickly, they have Jaron Brown, John Brown, J.J. Nelson, and then, of course, Larry Fitzgerald, who's old reliable. I think the speed could kind of kill the secondary for the Eagles. I am a little concerned about that, but I think kind of overall, I don't know, Arizona's defense is getting older. I think the Eagles will be able to run the ball, but I also think Carson Wentz will be throwing a little bit more this week.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think it's going to be more of a passing game for Carson.
Which one?
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Which one, Carson Palmer or Carson Wentz?
Carson Wentz, that's funny. Yeah, Carson Wentz. I do agree with you. I know Arizona struggles running the ball. I think they're only averaging like 80-some yards a game. They're not doing very well at all in that department. Obviously missing David Johnson. So, you have 32, I believe he's 32 years old, Chris Johnson back there.
Yep.
He's very far removed from CJ2K. But yeah, I mean, they're going to struggle running the ball. I feel like they're going to have to be one-dimensional. And I know they have some talent at receiver, but the big guy that that would scare me obviously is Larry Fitzgerald. We know he put the dagger in our hearts a number of times as Eagles fans. Thinking back to that long touchdown against the Eagles in the NFC Championship
Yeah.
game.
I
Um,
didn't think we'd bring that up this week, but
yeah, what
it
we
is what
did.
it is.
But yeah, no, I actually think, looking, I was really looking at what Arizona wanted to establish last week, and it kind of scares me a little bit too, because looking at what they're trying to do with Andre Ellington in the passing game, could kind of cause problems for the Eagles, especially if Bradham has a week like last week. He was missing a lot of tackles, his coverage was off. So I think that they might be able to expose that area. Michael Hendricks has played pretty well. But I know Jordan Hicks is still coming back from an injury, so that's kind of my X factor. I would look at is kind of looking at Andre Ellington coming out of the backfield and catching a few balls.
Yeah, but to be honest, one of the things, just kind of thinking about that, one of the things that the Eagles have done really well, not last week, kind of thinking back on it, but I feel like the Eagles have done very well on keeping the wide receiver or the running back coming out of the backfield in front of them, not letting them get the first down on second and long. And they're kind of putting teams behind the chains. And I don't know. I just feel like even though Bradham and Kendricks are kind of more run support, I think they have stepped up a little bit. And, the Eagles play a lot of nickel. So I wouldn't be surprised if you see Patrick Robinson. I almost said Patrick Peterson. Patrick Robinson kind of shadowing almost Andre Ellington if he is on the field. Before we get to final predictions, I did want to throw out the stat of the week. The stat of the week, the Cardinals have the 30th worst winning percentage in the Eastern time zone in the modern Super Bowl era at 36% with a record of 73 and 133. Only Cincinnati and Houston are worse in that category, so hopefully the travel will not bode well for the Cardinals and they come up a little sluggish in the beginning. The Eagles get out to a lead like they have the last few weeks. And we'll see where it goes from there. I think the Eagles will kind of control this game again through time of possession. And yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if Larry Fitzgerald does have a touchdown, does have close to 100 yards. But I got a weird feeling that Alshon Jeffrey is kind of going to match Larry Fitzgerald's production this week. And yeah, he's going against Patrick Peterson, but I feel like he might start winning those jump balls now that we're kind of through a quarter of the way of the season. I wouldn't be surprised if he had something like a touchdown at 80 yards or 2 touchdowns and 60 yards or something like that. So I think they really need to get him going. You touched on Torrey Smith a little earlier. But as far as a final prediction for me, I'm going to take the Eagles 31-20 in a rocking chair ride. And I don't think Eagles fans have to fret at all this week. I think it's an easy win.
Yeah, I tend to agree. There's definitely some points you could make about the Cardinals, but I mean, all you really got to do is look at what they did against the 49ers last week.
Yep.
and kind of know who they are.
They're old.
Their offense is completely different without David Johnson. I believe he accounted for 36% of their entire offense last year. So they're desperately missing him. But I do like the Eagles in this game. I think that they're going to be able to kind of do what they want. Maybe a bit competitive in the first quarter, but I do like the Eagles at home, and I think that Carson Wentz is going to be able to get everyone involved. And I like Nelson Aguilar a lot in this game, and I like Torrey Smith. I wouldn't be surprised to see Jeffrey get like a red zone touchdown like we saw last week.
Mm-hmm.
But I really do expect Torrey Smith to have a big game and Nelson Aguilar to be used a lot in this game, and maybe kind of just use Alshon as a decoy against Patrick Peterson. Get the best player away from the ball, and maybe he will win some battles this week. But I think that this is a big week for Torrey Smith, and in that the fact that he's at home, he's a veteran. He's got to improve. I really expect him to have a big week. But yeah, him and Aguilar with the speed threats, I really like the Eagles' chances in that. But that being said, I like the Eagles 24-10 in this game.
24-10. Let's write it down. Wow, 10 points. I think you're right. If you force Arizona to become one-dimensional, I think they can put pressure on Carson Palmer and throw Alshon Jeffrey a fade route in the end zone. We haven't seen it in Doug Peterson's play calling, so I don't know, just got to get him involved in the red zone, give him a jump ball opportunity, and see what he does with it. That's going to wrap up episode 55 of the Sports On broadcast. Kind of crazy that we've done 55 of these. You guys can catch us on Facebook, Twitter, and anything else that you really like. I'm going to throw it over to Joe. He's going to shut it down, and thank you all for joining us. We will be back next Wednesday at 8 o'clock. Hopefully the Eagles are 4-1.
All right, guys. Thanks for another great week. As always, you can head over to mysportingedge.com for our latest news articles and updates. Don't forget to head over to Twitter, follow us on there, check out our YouTube channel as well. We're also on Periscope. But, don't forget to head over and check out our apparel store as well. We're open, ready for business. It is Breast Cancer Awareness Month. Definitely check that stuff out. We have a few items up on there. But all right, guys, we'll catch you next week.